Listen that. 3 short presentations. Climbing plants that impress. Water features. Tomatoes. Climbing plants that impress. Spring. All clematis have presence. It's the large, in-your-face flowers that steal the show. But the small and dainty should not be ignored. This is a rampant grower, so allow lots of space. It's almondii. It's very fragrant. And this is a picture of a bud opening. I just love this picture. Another small flowered rampant grower. Montana. Comes in different shades of pink and white. Guernsey cream. Now this is a big in-your-face clematis. This picture shows the clematis in full afternoon sunlight, giving it a yellow glow. This is the actual colour, cream. From clematis to wisteria, another heavily scented plant. I train this every year to fill this space alongside this fence, just by the washing line, and while you're hanging the washing up, it smelled heavenly. Then we had to have the fence renewed, and we didn't have any growth for about 3 years afterwards. I sadly missed it. We thought it was dead, but it's gradually come back to life, throwing up long branches to train. I had about 4 flowers this year. This wisteria got a bit straggly, simply because it was out of reach. It's very vigorous, and for a number of years we were treated to this magnificent display, as were the neighbours. Then about 4 years ago, he just up and died. It provided a lovely perch for birds from all around to sit on, and they did. Some honeysuckle called mandarin. Lovely crisp flowers. Black fly, no problem. This picture was taken when the plant was fairly new. As you can still see the archway underneath it, but it has now been flowering profusely for many years. There are, of course, clematis for every season. This variety is Gravetye Beauty, growing through the purple Acer palmatum dissectum, which complements the colour wonderfully. Pagoda. This grew up a pyramid support in the middle of a deep border, throwing out masses of flower that stand out well from the plant. Gerandii. I just love this. We saw this first in a nursery, climbing up one of their poles that supported an archway. Absolutely stunning. The flowers differ in size, in colour, number of petals, but that all adds to its charm. And because it is climbing plants, it doesn't have tendrils to cling onto things, so you have to sort of tie it in up and around you go. But I think this one this year particularly was held up by bindweed, as are many plants. Polish spirit, that's the dark clematis, and H.F. Young, the paler coloured one. Now the pale coloured one isn't rampant, it just grew up into this mass of flower produced by Polish spirit. Lovely contrast. And this is what it looks like the other side of the archway, right next to that honeysuckle. As you can see, very vigorous honeysuckle. But this flowers, this clematis flowers and flowers and flowers all summer long. Roses. Now there's a lot to choose from. This is Graham Thomas. We've had this in the garden for over 20 years, grown as and bought as a shrub. But Gardener's World reckons it's a climber, and it does tend to get a bit straggly, so we'll call it a climber. Has masses of blooms. And Gloriana, beautiful, beautiful, deep pink. This is it on my fence. I train it down, I take the long branches and tie it into the supports we have along that fence, and we get these masses of strong, sturdy, upright growing branches. The one problem is where it's placed, is because it faces directly the afternoon sun, and the afternoon sun bleaches the tips of the flowers, which is a shame, but it's still beautiful. American pillar. There we have it, trained up along the fence down the bottom of my garden. The profusion of bloom is so heavy, it's very hard to keep it up. And this is one flower head. Never dismiss a single rose, because they can produce wonderful displays of colour. This is very similar to Queen Elizabeth. The Pilgrim. Flowers continuously through the summer. And this grows up a conical support in the border. Autumn. Pyracantha or firethorn. Strictly, this isn't really classed as a climber, it's a shrub, but it can be trained to climb up and over archways, over fences, over walls, and create stunning displays. These were on an arch down the road from where I live. Vitis vinifera purpurea, a grapevine with its stunning autumn colour, and some grapes into the bargain. It's quite vigorous. I had this trained over an arbour in the garden until the wind blew the arbour over and pulled the roots out. Autumn is the time for tidying up and pruning. I try to prune the honeysuckle to leave a small part of this year's growth. The clematis, as you can see, has been cut back, and it's cut back to about 18 inches high. I do this, as I say, in autumn, in November. People say you shouldn't do it till February, but this is the best time for me. And winter. More clematis. This is on the same fence as the archway that had Polish Spirit on it during the summer. This is clematis, red freckles, and Jersey cream. They weren't meant to be growing together, and I didn't expect all the growth, all the flower to be on the opposite side of the fence that I wanted it to be. But you have to admit this looks stunning. A close-up of the bloom. And this picture shows the clematis a bit later in the winter. Nasty lot of bindweed growing through it. It should have been removed when first noticed, but it was difficult to pull it out without harming the rest of the display. You prune winter flowering clematis after flowering, and only if they need tidying up. And when they finish flowering, we treat you to a lovely display of seed heads. Sephora Sun King. This is in my front garden, and people stop to look at it when it's covered in bloom like this. It is so different. It must have been a mild winter actually, because the bananas to the left there, they're coming into growth quite early. Now this plant can become quite ungainly if left to its own devices, so you have to prune it back as you would like it to be seen. Prune in summer, because this minimises the problems caused by the plant bleeding. And this is a close-up of the flower. Quite lovely. Fishing pond. Where you pay a lot of money to have a nice quiet time trying to catch fish. This fishing pond is not far from me. Very peaceful. Fish pond. Koi carp. These belong to a member of the garden club. A lovely big pond with beautiful fish. He had to take care, lots of care, to protect them from the heron. Beth Chatto's ornamental pond. Beth Chatto, famous for her dry garden in Essex, but there is this lovely pond in the main garden. But we can't all have something that big. So we try something to suit our site and pocket. A small ornamental structure, a garden feature, and a small pond. 3 projects. Project 1. Paul's raised water feature. The base of the pond is still. The waterfall is a contained unit with a pump in the bottom and the transformer is in the garage behind. Plants are a miniature water lily and 2 iris, a pale blue and dark hom. The flipping magpies will keep using it to bathe in, disturbing the plants and splashing the water out, says Paul. Project 2. A small, mobile, hopefully interesting feature. Equipment needed. A container. Water. This was from our pond. Pebbles and gravel for finishing. Bricks to give height to plants. Ornaments. I used a small terrapin found in Anne's garden. All the equipment apart from the plants was from the house and garden. The terrapin likes to wander. I find it in different parts of the garden some days, so obviously we have a visitor during the night who likes to take it for walkies. Plants. They bought from a local nursery and they were chosen for their height, colour and texture. A little water lily, a nice black iris, a grass and a multicoloured foliage plant. Highland Arrow. I put the tub in its final resting place first because it would be very heavy when full. The shed needed livening up, so there it went. And in the afternoon, when it was the strongest sun, it was out of the way. Trying out the best way to display the plants. Halfway through, I realised the iris needed to be in a more pleasing pot. So there it is, all changed. And I thought also, even though it was in a sheltered place, it needed something in front of it to break up the shiny metal, because it was getting quite warm. Project 3. Making a small pond. Decide where you want to put it and then you can decide on the size. You'll need lining, lots of options for the lining, preformed shapes, butyl liner material, concrete, and I expect there's more. You need a spirit level, keep things level, sharp sand, some form of edging material, to hide the join, some plants, statuary, and time. Placement. Anne found this liner on her new allotment, so she decided to use her old veg patch in the garden for her pond. She decided on a Japanese theme and dug out the hole and lined it with damp sand. Doing it in phases so as to ease the heavy work. Filling in. When the pond was in place, she backfilled with the sand, wetting it when she got halfway, then finished putting the sand down the sides. This to protect the sides of the pond and stabilize it. It was a fiddly job. So furnishings. Anne loves aces, and she had all this Japanese statue area dotted around the garden, so she pulled it all together. Most of the big rock pieces came from our dismantled rock garden. The morning after the water was put in, it was home to a frog. Finished project. Anne used basalt chippings. They were very reasonably priced and, of course, black. Sarah, her friend, helped to bring the chippings round from the front and then lay it all out. The project took 4 days, spread over a month. Looks good. Maintenance. November and March are the times to choose to tidy the pond, not in the same year, and not every year. I tend to put it off that it is a very smelly, dirty, wet job. This is November, and the pond is in a very messy state. I clear out all the yuck and water so I can really get into the pond and make sure the liner is okay. All the wildlife has left, and I'm able to do that without worry. As you can see, it's a mess. My small pond is really just a hole in the ground with a sloping bottom. We've had it since the children were able to be aware of the dangers. Once clean and the plants, water lilies and some spiky ones are tidied up, they will go back in and the pond is filled up. This is a different year and it's March. The pond is full of blanket weed and duckweed. But full of life as well. Newts. Creepy crawlers of some description. Water boatmen. The purple foliage sort of glowed. Over the years, we've seen quite a lot of life in the pond. caddisfly larvae, frog spawn, frogs, newts, dragonfly emerging from its previous life, and dragonflies fully grown. This slide wasn't in the original presentation, but this year we had masses of newts, so I just had to include it. Tomatoes, Solanum lycopersicum. The tomatoes are a fruit. Many people think they are vegetables, but they are a fruit. They are an extremely healthy food source, in large part due to their high concentration of lycopene, an antioxidant that has been shown to reduce the risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and macular degeneration. Types of tomatoes. Indeterminate, strong and upright, cordon grown up stakes or string, in grow bags or the ground, the bushy shoots rubbed out to stop bushy growth, and plants continue to grow, flower and produce fruit all season. Determinate, bushy plants, left to grow naturally. They still need support except those grown in a basket. Best grown in the ground, but can be container grown, so to fruit over a shorter period. The choice is vast. Catalogues have pages devoted to them, so it's quite difficult to know where to start. There we go. Masses of them. And that's page 3, I think. I think the question to ask yourself is, what will the family eat? How many can I comfortably grow? And then pick a mixture of types, but not to sow too many of each. There are different types and colours to choose from in each category. Cooking, beefsteak, those big things, quite ugly looking sometimes. The standard, nice round tomato, and the cherry, nice petite, pretty ones. And there is a mixture of colour and size and form. Now, I've got to say from the outset that I don't eat tomatoes as a fruit. My husband does, he loves them. My children do. But I cook them for me for cooking. So bear that in mind as we go through. So what's next? You've chosen our seeds, sown them, they've germinated, and they're ticking along nicely. Here's a nice big selection in my greenhouse. Too many, but this was many years ago. I've got a lot less now. Make sure the greenhouse or your tunnel is ready for occupation. Buy compost, grow bags, stakes, and twine. Make sure the containers, baskets are clean. Prepare the soil. And soil and compost are most important. Tomatoes need a very fertile soil, so replace grow bags every year and redo the compost in any other container. Soil in borders or tunnels need to be enriched with plenty of well-rotted manure or compost at planting time, and I do stress well-rotted. If it's fresh manure, it will burn the roots. Add a generous amount of feed when planting out your plants. Put your feed at the bottom of the hole you've made for the plant, then cover with a layer of soil. This prevents the feed from burning the roots as well. General cultivation. Indeterminate and determinate types outside. Sowing time, mid-spring. Planting out time, early summer. Planting distance. Well, there we go, lots of different ideas here. I generally do about 18 inches for each plant wherever I grow them. And harvesting midsummer onwards. General cultivation or indeterminate types for greenhouse or tunnel. There we have them, all in the side border there. Sowing time, early to mid-spring. Planting time, mid to late spring. And planting distance, 18 inches. Harvesting early summer onwards. Ring culture method. Now this is a way of growing tomatoes my husband uses. So there we have a compost bag. He doesn't use grow bags as such. He uses a big bag of compost. Then he makes 2 holes, equidistant apart, and a third hole, smaller hole, in the front, in which he puts a pot with holes in, and he waters through this pot. Then he puts his rings, his plastic rings, on top, and just bear in mind these should fit the hole, but couldn't find it easy to get the shape right. You put your ring culture pot on top. The ring culture pot has no bottom, and then you top that up with soil, and then you put your plants in. Easy peasy. Alan feeds his plants once they've sort of settled in and he's staked them all up. He feeds through the ring culture, not through the pot in the front. That's just for watering. Grow bags for indeterminate, ring culture method. And there we have Alan's plants in his greenhouse. And you can see there the black ring cultures fit that hole nicely, and he's got his little pots in front through which he waters. These do extremely well. And here we have some hanging ones in a basket. This is one of our members' baskets, and he was very dubious about trying it at first, but he got masses of tomatoes. Watering containers. They water regularly. Don't allow the compost to become dry. You'll need to water more often in hot, sunny periods. Giving the container extra water when allowed to dry out does not help at all. And when they're in the ground, pretty much the same as containers. but the plants will not suffer as much if left a little longer between waterings. I think the roots delve deeper down to get the moisture. Feeding containers. Dilute the feed according to the packet instructions. And you start 5 to 6 weeks after your plants have been planted in grow bags. 3 weeks in small containers like hanging baskets. Growing them in the ground every 1 to 2 weeks, but make sure it is regular and from when your first fruits have set. Always read the instructions on the packet. Problems. Blossom end rot. Caused by lack of calcium to the fruit due to irregular watering. This happens more in container-grown plants than those in the ground. Water regularly, but don't swamp the soil with water. Whitefly. Grow marigolds and basil around the plant. Helps to deter blight. And I have to say, there's not much you can do about blight. If it comes your way and you notice this brown marks on the stems, you've got to get rid of your plants straight away and put them in the bin. Do not put them in your compost bin. Botrytis. Botrytis is caused through lack of fresh air flowing around the plants. So make sure your doors and windows are open of your greenhouse and you pick up any dead foliage that you see. Mosaic virus, again, is a virus. If it comes your way, there's not much you can do about it, really. Again, just pick off the foliage and bin them. Don't put them in your compost bin. And there's lots more. Try to buy disease-resistant varieties. And I know that is very easy to say because some of the varieties I like to grow aren't disease-resistant. Prevention is better than cure. Look after your soil and use fresh compost in container-grown plants. Keep the area free of weeds and fallen foliage. Thin out the foliage to allow good air circulation and ventilate your greenhouse and tunnel well. Clean all tools used for pruning your tomatoes. Knives, secateurs, scissors, your fingers, and often. It's common sense really, but we tend to get a bit lazy and not use our common sense. So what to do with all the tomatoes we can't eat straight away? Well, you can freeze them. I used to take the skins off when I use them for puree and in meals, but since I learned that most of the goodness is in the skin, I don't. I have found that the 4-pint plastic milk bottles are ideal for storing small cherry tomatoes once they're frozen. And with your large tomatoes, slice them up, cut them up into quarters, into halves and freeze them. Do wash them first and dry them. Then open freeze, and once they're frozen, bag them up and put them back in the freezer. Normal cherry size, wash, dry, put on a tray, open freeze, and again bag them up. You can make soup. I make lots of tomato soup. I do like tomato soup. Alan loves it. So we make a big quantity and then freeze it and take out as and what we need, as and when we need it. And then I puree a lot. Two types of puree here. The lighter one is just tomato, boiled up and reduced. And the other three, they have been cooked with onion and garlic. And they're reduced again, put through a blender, and then I put them in these plastic cups and freeze them. I have reused these plastic cups for years now. They're very cheap to begin with, and they work extremely well. One is just enough for using in sauces and stews for 2 people. Then I open freeze them, and when they're frozen, I put them in bags and put them back in the freezer. I have a big freezer. And I make preserves. This is tomato and vegetable relish. Alan loves this. And because it's a relish, you don't have to keep it so long before you can use it. 6 weeks, and then you can start using it. And tomato sauce. Now, tomato sauce uses masses, and I mean masses of tomatoes just to get a little bit of sauce. So I've only made it a couple of times really, but it tastes superb. But it does use a lot of fruit. Thank you.